Alright, this video will focus on chapter 29, Western Europe during the High Middle Ages from 1000 to 1300 CE. So, for a little brief summary of Europe during this time, from 500 to 1000, it was the early Middle Ages. Europe was in the early Middle Ages or the Dark Ages, or basically Christianization. From 1000 to 1300, you had the High Middle Ages with Sovereignization and the Crusades. And in the 1300 to 1500, you had the later Middle Ages and the Black Death and the Renaissance. So, during the early Middle Ages, regional states became the basis for a stable political order. New tools and technologies led to increased agricultural production and economic growth. Missionary efforts of the Western Christian Church brought Europe and cultural religious unity to most of Europe. And now let's go into the High Middle Ages. So this is a map of the regional states of medieval Europe around 1250. England being here. We have some, familiar ones with the Holy Roman Empire, which, as Voltaire said, it's not really holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. We have the Papal States administered by the Catholic Church, administered by the Pope in Rome. The Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, Aragon, Castile, Portugal, France, Navarre, Ireland, England, Scotland, Poland, Hungary, and the slowly decaying Byzantine Empire. So, the Holy Roman Empire, Otto I of Saxony takes advantage of the decline of the Carolingian Empire to establish a kingdom in North Germany in the mid-10th century. He then launches military ventures into Eastern Europe. He twice enters Italy to aid the Catholic Church, and in exchange for these services, Pope John XII names Otto Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire in 962 CE. However, this relationship between the emperors and the Pope could be strained because both made large claims to authority in Christian Europe. Neither the popes nor the emperors were strong enough to dominate the other. So you had this almost like this pluralistic system with both the pope and the emperor having some share of power, but not having all of it. There was something called the investiture contest in the late 11th and early 12th centuries, which concerned a controversy over the appointment of church officials. Pope Gregory VIII attempts to end the practice of lay or non-church investiture. Basically, he doesn't want local kings and rulers to appoint church officials. And in order to get his point across, he excommunicated Emperor Henry IV. This motivates the German princes to take the opportunity to rebel against the emperor, with the princes winning concessions that enhance their independence and diminish the emperor's authority. So this is a very low-quality image of Pope Gregory, and I believe it's Henry IV. So some regional monarchies out of France. There's Capetian France, created when Hugh Capet succeeded the last Carolingian Empire Emperor in 987. These kings gradually centralized power and authority in France. In England, you had the Normans, who were the descendants of Vikings that settled in France. They invade England in 1066 under William the Conqueror and dominate the Anglo-Saxons and other Germanic groups. They built a highly centralized state. In Italy, it's a mess. No single regime controlled the entire peninsula. Instead, you had a series of classical states like the Papal States, city-states, and principalities competing for power and position. The Papal States, directly controlled by the Pope, administered a good-sized portion of territory in central Italy. By the 12th century, city-states were increasingly displacing church authority in northern Italy. The lay classes challenging the bishops and eventually displacing them as ruling authorities. Normans with papal approval and support invaded southern Italy, displacing the Byzantine and Muslim authorities. In the Iberian Peninsula, a series of regional states also competed for power. Muslims had controlled most of the Iberian Peninsula from the 8th to 12th centuries. However, from the 11th century on, Christians began reconquering Spanish Muslim territories. By the late 13th century, you only had Muslims in Granada. Medieval Europe might seem compared to the present, a chaotic and confusing political spectacle, particularly when compared to lands such as China, but there was some commonalities going on. You had a dramatic increase in agricultural yields, forming the foundation of economic growth and social development. You had the expansion of arable land, or aka the Great Clearing. This is because there's less threat of invading nomads, population pressures, and the clearing of forests and drained swamps. The draining of swamps. You also had improved agricultural techniques like crop rotation, new crops, especially beans, horseshoes, and horse collars, which allowed you to use horses to actually pull heavy farming objects rather than oxen, which were slow. You also had a warming period, which also helped a lot. So this is a graph depicting population growth in Europe from 800 to 1300 CE, with the population in Europe really being less than 30 million in 800 CE and exploding a half century later to a little under 80 million. With abundant supplies of food, European society was able to support large numbers of urban residents. For the first time since the fall of the Western Roman Empire, cities began to play a major role in economic and social development, with specialization in labor, such as textile production and Mediterranean trade, with Italy being well positioned for sea trade and the Italian colonies establishing major ports in the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. The Hanseatic League was an association of trading cities in northern Europe. They engaged in trade in the Baltic and North Seas, dominating trade in grain, fish, furs, and timber. The increasing volume of trade encouraged the development of credit, banking, and other new forms of business organization and new forms of big business organizations. This league peaked around 1300 to 1450. So this is a map depicting the cities of the Hanseatic League as well as the major trade routes they engaged in. You had free estates in medieval Europe, or classes: those who pray, the clergy; those who fight, knights; and those who work, peasants. However, this is an oversimplification of the complex social reality. This formula overlooked the processes that brought considerable change to medieval European society. Chivalry was the code of ethics and behavior considered appropriate for nobles, sponsored by the church to minimize fighting among Christians. Rather than seek wealth and power, the nobles would observe the chivalric code. The nobles who did observe this code would devote themselves to the causes of order, piety, and the Christian faith. This was basically a form of taming of all of these Christians. Women promoted refined behavior and tender, respectful relations between sexes. Through something called Troubadours, which were inspired by Muslim love poems. The reflections of their interests survive in the songs and poems of the Troubadours, traveling poets, minstrels, entertainers whom aristocratic women patronized. They borrowed from Spanish Islamic traditions of love poetry. This led to a spread of cultural ideas to Europe. You also had a spread of other cultural ideas to Europe, such as which was popular. This was due to you got this spread of Islamic traditions due to the spread of cultural ideas to Europe. It's popular among aristocratic women, with Eleanor of Aquitaine being a major supporter. The popularization of the idea of romantic love led to the refinement of European knights. There were also some in the cities. You had additions to the class of those who work, such as merchants, artisans, physicians, lawyers, etc. They awkwardly fit in. They didn't exactly fit neatly into the framework of the medieval political order. By the late 11th century, towns demanded charters of integration for greater self-government. Guilds were organizations of merchants, workers, and artisans. By the 13th century, guilds controlled a good portion of the urban economy. They were responsible for price and quality control, and also in charge of the membership in the admission of new workers. Apart from regulating work, guilds constituted a kind of social infrastructure that made it possible for medieval cities to function. Medieval towns and cities offered fresh opportunities for women as well as men. They dominated occupations involving textiles and decorative arts, with representation in a wide variety of trades. They were admitted to most guilds. An increasing prominence of women in European society illustrates the significance of towns and cities as agents of social change. So this is a picture of a cathedral in Europe. They were basically analogous to the Great Pyramids. During the early Middle Ages, European society was too unstable and poor for much education. You had some rudimentary education at monasteries, with occasional scholars at courts. During the High Middle Ages, increasing wealth made education possible. There was a demand for educated individuals who could deal with political, legal, and theological issues. Schools were based in cathedrals at this time, with a curriculum of Latin writings dealing with literature, philosophy, some law, medicine, and theology. Universities began to pop up at Oxford, Cambridge, Paris, and Bologna, all in the 12th century. Student guilds formed for protection from getting ripped off by landlords. Faculty guilds formed to control who could teach and to be able to grant degrees. Higher standards of education were also were promoted at these universities, with instruction in law, theology, and medicine. Latin translations of Byzantine Greek texts began circulating in Europe, with Jewish and Muslim scholars providing other translations from Arabic translations. St. Thomas, one of the things you get is writings of Aristotle getting into Europe. St. Thomas Aquinas would be a major proponent of scholasticism, a synthesis of Christianity and Aristotle, revelation plus reason. This provided intellectual legitimacy and inspiration to Christian elites. However, for the lay people, Christianity focused on beliefs and rituals that gave meaning to individual lives and that bound them together into coherent communities. There was a big focus on the seven sacraments, just Eucharist, baptism, and penitence. You also had a devotion to the saints, relics, and pilgrimages. People prayed for saints to look after their spiritual interests and to ensure their admission into heaven. For example, you had one example would be the Virgin Mary, Notre Dame, the Virgin Mary and the Notre Dame Cathedral with relics of a saint. So this is this is a map of possible paths to pilgrimage to where Apostle James was buried. However, you did get some discontent. You had rebellion against perceived materialism of the Roman Catholic Church, or worldliness. They believed that power corrupts, as they say, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Saint Dominic and Saint Francis created orders of mendicants or beggars. They vowed to be, their followers vowed to be poor. You also had some popular preachers, religious zealots who are very opposed to heretical movements. One of the most popular heresy movements was Waldensians. They despised the Roman Catholic clergy as immoral and corrupt. They urged more lay control of preaching and sacraments. Also, the Cathars. They viewed the world as a site of an unrelenting cosmic struggle between the forces of good and evil. They considered the material world as evil. So to combat this, they vowed chastity, vegetarianism, and poverty. Pope Innocent III would eventually destroy the Catholic movement in the 13th century. Powerful states, economic expansion, and demographic growth all strengthened European society. So Catholic officials encouraged the colonization of pagan and Muslim lands as a way to extend the influence of the Roman Catholic Church. Religious Christians formed military religious orders and pledged to devote their lives in efforts to struggle against Muslims and pagans. For example, the Teutonic Knights. Sicily had been taken by the Muslims in the 9th century, however, was reconquered by Normans in the 11th century. This led to a very slow displacement of Islam. The Reconquista of Spain would take much longer, centuries in fact. Leading clergy of the Roman Catholic Church regarded Islam as an affront to Christianity, and they enthusiastically encouraged such campaigns such as these against the Muslims. One of the most famous examples of these campaigns would be the Crusades. Here are some reasons why the Crusades were launched. The Church wanted to cut down warfare between Christian lords and redirect it toward enemies of the Church. Ambitious lords were looking for new lands to conquer. Italian merchants wanted to increase trade. The papal effort The papacy began efforts to unite Western European kings under the banner of a common faith. Pope Urban II calls for the liberation of Jerusalem from Muslim control in 1095. He promised salvation for those who died in battle, and unsurprisingly, he got a rapid, enthusiastic response. Peter the Hermit raises popular frenzy however, his mob gets destroyed on the way to Jerusalem. Now, in 1096 to 1099, you have a more organized expedition, the First Real Crusade. They managed to capture Jerusalem largely due to Muslim organization. However, this capture of Jerusalem proves incredibly brutal and bloody. However, but Salah al-Din, aka Saladin, recaptures Jerusalem in 1187. 5 Crusades by mid 13th century, you had 5 Crusades. Yet you have had 5 Crusades, none successful in reestablishing a Christian presence in Palestine, with the 4th Crusade actually destroying Constantinople from 1202 to 1204. However, the Crusades provided direct contact with Muslim ideologies and trade. You also got an influx of Aristotle, Arabic numerals, and paper production. This inspires a drive for a new route to India and China. And this is a map of the medieval expansion of Europe with these being the Hanseatic League cities and some major trade routes. That is all. Thank you for listening.